The occupation authorities of Crimea are persecuting opponents of the war. More than 70 administrative protocols were filed against Crimeans under the article of discrediting the Russian army, reports the Crimean human rights group. The total amount of fines issued has already exceeded 2 million rubles. The reason for the detention in almost all cases was a denunciation. The most common reasons for persecution were publications in social networks or single pickets. In addition, human rights activists talk about the activation of the FSB, Federal Security Service, in search of saboteurs.
With regard to individual people, there are even several court decisions with these new articles. Now they will look for someone to blame. They will turn people against each other as much as possible. And the repressive machine that exists now and for the last 8 years in Crimea, this pressure will only intensify.
The Crimean Tatar Resource Center among human rights violations notes the increased influence of propaganda since the beginning of the Russian invasion and the illegal conscription of Crimeans to serve in the Russian army. In addition, there are facts about preparations for illegal mobilization in Crimea.
Russia hid this information without indicating how many people were legally drafted into the ranks of the Russian army. This is at least 3,000 people, and it is clear that these may be those conscripts whom Russia sends to participate in hostilities against Ukraine. In addition, if Putin announces mobilization, general or partial, then we see that Crimea is ready. For example, Aksyonov issued an order to prepare several thousand places in the cemetery and also to prepare thousands of places in hospitals.
Journalists and human rights activists are persecuted on the annexed peninsula in order to make it more difficult to fight the repressive machine of the occupiers in Crimea. For example, the recent demonstrative detention of 3 lawyers who were helping political prisoners in Crimea, Nazim Sheikhmamedov, Aider Azamatov and Emine Avamileva. They were detained right on the threshold of the so-called court, according to the Crimean Process Civil Initiative. According to the organization, the majority of court hearings in the annexed Crimea are closed, without attesting witnesses, and almost 80% of the defense's petitions are rejected by the occupying judges.
Lawyers were spied, their accounts were hacked, 2 lawyers were deprived of their licenses according to a fabricated procedure. Lawyers are also persecuted to deprive people of the opportunity to defend themselves. The only example that has been recently is the case of Radio Liberty journalist Vladislav Yesipenko. He was sentenced to 6 years in February. There was an appeal recently, and the lawyer succeeded in reducing his sentence by 1 year.
Since 2014, Russia has been trying to turn the annexed Crimea from a tourist peninsula into a military garrison, which cannot but threaten local residents. And in connection with the increased number of explosions and fires on the peninsula, the Crimeans are turning into a human shield, they say in the Crimea Source organization. It is difficult for people in the annexed Crimea to even go to church or read non-propaganda news. After all, most Ukrainian resources on the peninsula are blocked.
And if earlier Russian-controlled Crimean media used hate speech against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Crimean Tatars, Muslims, Ukrainian activists, now it has moved from hate speech to calls for genocide. Just calling for genocide is an international crime.
Nowadays, more than 100 political prisoners are illegally held in the prisons of the annexed Crimea. Human rights activists fear that with the growth of panic in the ranks of the occupying Crimean authorities, the violation of rights and repressions against the indigenous population of the peninsula will become more frequent. Reported by Serhiy Kulyas, Yulia Bezborodko, UATV News.